most important climate conference kicks off in Glasgow, Scotland in the coming week, COP26. The Convention for Climate Change, where countries are supposed to announce tough new targets for reducing carbon emissions to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees. And ideally to no more than 1.5 degrees as compared with pre-industrial levels. Now, scientists insist this is perhaps the humanity's last chance to avert a climate disaster by committing to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The real estate industry or the built environment is responsible for, and hold your breath on this number, almost 40% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And it will be impossible to achieve a net zero economy without real estate becoming net zero. So today, in this COP26 special on climate change, we ask, is India's real estate sector ready for a massive overhaul? Joining me are Vinamra Srivastava. He's CEO of Business Parks CapitaLand India. And also with us, Tanmay Tathagat, Director, Environmental Design Solutions. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Vinamra, you're in the hot seat today. So, have leading companies like yours realized that this is a grave problem? And are you setting much bolder commitments than before?
Absolutely, Manisha. You rightly said real estate contributes 30 to 40% to global greenhouse gases emissions. It also consumes almost 40% of world's energy, according to UNEP. What has happened over the last few years is, as global investments have flown across geographies, and especially between the developed world and the emerging markets in real estate, expectations of investors on standards of sustainability and ESG have skyrocketed. At the same time, occupiers who occupy this real estate have also become increasingly sophisticated and demanding for the right reasons in terms of wanting to be in a built environment that is environment friendly. So all of these put together, I think, has put real estate right front and center at the heart of the sustainability movement for all the right reasons. And CapitaLand, as one of the leading organizations globally, we have been consistently ranked on Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the GRESB, and all the global indices on our sustainability.
Vinamra, will you be able to reach that carbon neutrality by 2050? Because, if we don't get to net zero, we are in trouble. So my question is, I went through the ESG document. Yes, there are commitments, but I didn't see or read any commitments to a net zero. Is that something which is where you're headed at least, or there is a consciousness that you need to reach there?
Absolutely, Manisha. The only reason why we haven't put a number or a particular year to say when we will be net zero is only because we want to take this step by step and make very bold commitments for the next 10 years. And that is why we have gone ahead and committed to the aggressive targets on by 2030. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, the direction is absolutely to make sure all our buildings, especially the new ones and the old ones after retrofitting, ultimately achieve the net zero target. We are very mindful of greenwashing as well. We want to make sure that whatever commitments we make are practically achievable within the timelines we are setting ourselves. So 2030 is our first step. I'm very sure as we reach closer, we will be announcing our next steps on further targets, with the ultimate goal absolutely being to becoming net zero in all our developments globally.
You've raised a very important point, which is that you're also looking at your older buildings. Now, Tanmay, if I look at what's happening globally as well as in India, in fact, India, the number is almost 95% of our buildings are already built and they're not green. Globally, 80% of all the buildings that will exist in 2050 have already been built. So there's millions of square feet of commercial, domestic and public sector real estate which needs to be retrofitted or decarbonized. I understand in the last 4 to 5 years, the consciousness has been amazing. As Vinamra said that, real estate companies, leaders like theirs, or even tenants and the big global Fortune 500 companies are all driving sustainable buildings. What about the ones which came in existence before? What do you do with that? All retrofits are mostly LED lighting, but cooling and heating, which is really the big consumer here of energy, requires a bigger overhauling, isn't it?
Absolutely. As you said, globally, a large part of the real estate is already in existence and is going to be a challenge which the world has to face. And in India, the numbers are in fact even more interesting because According to some estimates, if you have to reach the same level of real estate footprint per person as some of the other countries, maybe even 60-70% of our built asset is yet to come. But every year, when you add all these new buildings, you are adding to this stock of existing buildings. And you also know that over a period of time, all of these buildings, even if they are designed to be energy efficient and green, need to ramp up their energy efficiency, their water efficiency, their carbon footprint needs to be looked at. So I agree that cooling is one of the biggest challenge that all existing buildings face. There's also overall focus on improved health and well-being, which is also contributing to a large extent on our energy footprint. So there are several options which companies and buildings of different kinds, whether it's a residential building or a commercial building, can take. Mm-hmm. There are proven examples within India where there has been 30 to 50, 60% improvement because cooling technology has changed over a period of time. Our understanding of thermal comfort has changed and improved over the last 20 years. So there is a possibility, but most of the time, it's a significant effort, both in terms of time and the inconvenience of doing it, and finally the investment, right? If building is working fine, if tenants are paying the rent, then it is easy to just stay in that status quo mode.
Vinamra, I'm going to come back to you on just delving a little bit deeper into decarbonizing existing buildings, and whether the benchmarks that you follow at CapitaLand, are they equal in India and the rest of the globe? Or do you feel that India is slightly behind and will take time because you've probably inherited some buildings as well?
Actually, interestingly, Manisha, despite our global efforts on being the world leader, India is actually leading the charge for CapitaLand globally. Just on the point of retrofitting the existing buildings, couldn't agree more. Because we've been in the business for so long, obviously there are buildings that are older that did not have the right HVAC technologies when they were built. What we have done is set ourselves target of complete upgrading of those buildings to at least gold or ideally platinum rating standards. And that will involve upgrading the HVAC equipment to ensure we get the energy efficiency. And what we also do is all our portfolio sits on a cloud-based network, which is called an intelligent building platform. That allows the buildings to talk to each other, use predictive analysis and weather monitoring, etc., to keep fine-tuning your AHU performance, for example, to achieve energy efficiency targets. So the numbers that Tanmay was mentioning, we have in India, for example, since 2011, reduced our energy efficiency intensity by 42%. Okay. Reduce our water efficiency by, or increase our water efficiency by around 36%. By next year, 100% of our buildings, even those that were 20 years old, will be completely green certified. We're also focusing on zero waste. Let's not forget beyond energy, water waste is a very important component of achieving sustainability goals. And the biggest focus for us in India is on push for renewable energy. Today, almost 40% of our energy demands in India are met through renewables. By next year, it will go beyond 50%. And that is where a lot of our investments are going to come in the future.
Okay. So you've covered actually every operational part. I'm not going to come back to you with that. But what about the embodied carbon emissions of a building? Because Vinamra, everybody that I'm speaking to in the real estate sector, the conversation has pretty much been on the operational part, and all excellent players like you have actually done a lot of work on energy, water and waste. But then the entire embodied emissions of a building, have you started looking at, if you have an option of better produced steel, more sustainably produced steel, to opt for that even at a higher cost, whether it's paint or cement, that you'd make those choices where there is a lower carbon footprint?
Our investment philosophy, Manisha, on sustainability starts right at the first stage, where we look at the entire value chain of real estate holistically, right from financing to investment, then to construction, then to leasing, and then to operations. So for us, operations, while it's always the most talked about, is only one part of the story. Now, on the construction side, you're absolutely right. Embodied carbon is one of the biggest issues for the industry. We are already doing a lot of internal research on alternative materials, how to use sustainable steel, how to use timber much more effectively that is sustainably produced, how to reduce wastage from construction. Because let's not forget, we always talk about the reduction in usage of water energy on the operation side. Construction gets missed, and that is where a huge amount of waste also comes in. So both on the use of sustainable materials as well as focusing on the entire construction phase of the project is where we are very heavily focused on. What we also do when we make our investments decision is we now build in an implicit carbon tax, an internal carbon tax on our investment decisions, which means that tomorrow in the future, should the regulatory environment change, have we already priced in our carbon impact? On top of that, we also budget in capex that is already needed to retrofit, build, and upgrade them to the kind of targets for sustainability that we have. And
right.
All of that comes to a factor that we have internally developed called return on sustainability. For every investment, we measure what is the value that sustainability efforts are going to generate. And ROS is as important for us as IRRs when we make our investment decisions.
Well, Tanmay, that's music to our ears, but then CapitaLand is an outlier, isn't it, in the vast canvas of India's real estate. I mean, I don't see too many companies looking at embodied carbon footprint of the materials that they use, how far that material travels, etc. Forget about right now cradle to cradle. I'm not going to touch upon that. I'm just going to look at the aspect that how much do we now holistically need to integrate sustainability into every aspect of what this sector builds?
There are two challenges when you look at the carbon intensity of building materials. And the biggest one being the metrics. It's easy for us to see the energy footprint and how many kilowatt hours or whatever per year because you get the energy bills. But the carbon footprint is largely invisible. And if I look at just India, where we have a large percentage of energy use going into the buildings, a significant portion of our industrial energy use is also contributing to the building sector, to cement, steel, aluminum, etc. And if I account for all of this, then in several kinds of buildings, especially let's say residential buildings, the embodied energy of the material, even if you look at the building after 30 years of use, will almost be equal, if not more, than the energy used by that building cumulatively over that period of time. So one is that it's invisible. It's not very easy to quantify, but there are efforts in that direction. So, recently, for example, UK has done this benchmarking under their transformation initiative for carbon, where they're looking at carbon footprint of building material in a rating. So, the baseline is something, let's say, a 500 tons per square meter of carbon, and it goes up to some, say, 200 odd.
So you're saying in the rating system itself, as we hand out those gold and platinum ratings, it's time now to bring in the embodied carbon footprint as well. Then here's my question. Should it be driven from the top by the Indian government? I mean, should they make it legally binding on the sector? What do you think?
See, government is doing a fair bit, I would say, on a couple of sectors that are that have a large energy footprint. So for cement, steel, and other industries, there is a PAT scheme that looks at improving their energy efficiency. And interestingly, if I look at the benchmark of cement production and the energy of cement production, many of our companies in India are amongst the best globally, but many of them are not. So, there is certain direction in which the industry goes driven by regulation. I'm an advocate of approaching it both ways. We really need to have this coming from the consumers, from the end users. And one of my issues or complaints with the rating system is that in order to become holistic, they incorporate so many things that very often it becomes difficult to discern what are the critical things and where you perform. So you may have a building that is, say, a LEED Gold or Platinum, but may not have done the most on embodied energy or even operational energy. And it's time for
audits,
us.
Audits, Tanmay, I've looked at it, and there is, I can pretty much count on my fingertips on the number of companies in the real estate sector which do an annual audit of their energy footprint. So any which way, that's a much larger conversation. I've run out of time, Vinamra. How hopeful are you that, our leaders this time will actually have some sort of a breakthrough and we will head towards that net zero target by 2050?
I think the interests are aligned. It really boils down to the combination of what private sector can do and what the government can do. The government, especially in India, needs to really focus on easing up policies, ensuring consistency of policies between the states and between the state and the federal, and also realizing that one of the key guzzlers of energy is going to be data centers for us in the future. So how do we come out with policies that can use renewable to support data centers? So I think that's what the government's role should be. The private sector, I think, has already started doing what they're supposed to be doing. The drop in solar panels prices by around 90% over the last decade has definitely helped. And today, producing renewable power is almost at par as brown power. So I think we're on the right track. I'm hoping there is more action from Glasgow this time in terms of not just firm commitments, because I think commitments have come thick and fast right from the Kyoto Protocol days, but really about how do we get this implemented on the ground and hold people responsible.
We definitely need a lot more action. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this discussion. In fact, this is too short a time. It's not a conversation which is going to get over in one show, but we will come back to you and have you back on another environment-related conversation very soon.